So, today we are going to discuss the chapter first of class 6th of history, and the name of the chapter is what, where, how, and when. Okay, so we are going to start this chapter, and I believe that you will enjoy this chapter. So, now we will start from this point. Here it is mentioned that Rashida's question. Rashida is a character which is for it is a girl who used to study in the class 6th, and she study in that class 6, and she one day she is reading the newspaper, so here that thing is started. So Rasida's question. Rasida sat reading the newspaper. Suddenly her eyes fell on a small headline. 100 years ago. How? She wondered. Could anyone know what had happened so many years ago? This was a question. Finding out what happened yesterday. You could listen to the radio, watch television, read newspaper. Last year, ask somebody who remembers. But what about long, long ago? Let us see how it can be done. What can we know about the past? There are several things we can find out: what people ate, the kinds of clothes they wore, the houses in which they lived. We can find out about the lives of hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, craft persons, artists, musicians, and scientists. We can also find out about the games children played, the stories they heard, the plays they saw, the songs they sang. Okay, all these things. Now, find the river Narmada on the map 1. People have lived along the banks of this river for several hundred thousand years. Banks of this river for several hundred thousand years. Some of the earliest people who lived here were skilled gatherers, इकट्ठा करने वाले. That is, the people who gathered their food. They knew about the vast wealth of plants in the surrounding forest and collected roots, fruits, and other forest products for their food. They also hunted animals. They also hunted animals. Now, now find the Suleiman and Kirtar hills to the northwest. So let us first see this part here. These are the Suleiman hills and Kirtar hills. This is the Narmada region here, and this is the Garo Khasi Jaintia region, and this is Ganges region, and this part is Sindhu region. And this is the Western Ghat, and here we should say this part is a Godavari part. Okay, up to this, and this is Mahanadi, and this part they're talking about Krishna and Kaveri, like this is, and this is, and here, sorry, this one is the Kaveri. Oh. So now you should understand the remaining things of this. Now find the Suleiman and Kirtar hills to the northwest. This thing is in Pakistan now. Some of the areas where women and men first began to grow crops such as wheat and barley about 8,000 years ago are located here. So we are talking about like Baluchistan area, Kirtar, है Kirtar and Suleiman Hills, that is situated in Baluchistan part of the Pakistan now. People also began rearing animals like sheep, goat, and cattle and lived in villages. Look at the Garo Hills to the northeast and Vindhyas in the central areas. This part I have told already. These were some of the other areas where where agriculture developed. So Garo Hills, nearby Garo Hills, the agriculture developed. The places where rice was first grown are to the north of the Vindhyas. Where the rice was first grown are to the north of Vindhyas. Trace the river Indus and its tributaries. Tributaries are the smaller rivers that flow into a larger river. About 4,700 years ago, some of the earliest cities flourished on the banks of these rivers. Later, about 2,500 years ago, cities developed on the banks of the Ganga and its tributaries along the sea coasts. Locate Ganga and its tributary called the Son. In ancient times, the area along these rivers to the south of the Ganga was known as Magadha. Its rulers were very powerful and set up a large kingdom. The kingdoms were set up in other parts of the country as well. Now, throughout the people traveled from one part of the subcontinent to the other. The hills and high mountains, including the Himalayas, desert, rivers, and sea, made journeys dangerous at times, but never impossible. So, men and women moved in search of livelihood as also to escape from natural disasters like floods and droughts. Sometimes men marched in armies, conquering others' lands. Besides, merchants traveled with caravans or ships, carrying valuable goods from place to place, and religious teachers walked from village to village, town to town, stopping to offer instruction and advice on the way. Finally, some people perhaps traveled driven by a spirit of adventure, wanting to discover new and exciting places. All these led to the sharing of ideas between the people. Why do people travel nowadays? Look at map 1 once more. Hills, mountains, and seas from natural frontiers of the subcontinent. While it was difficult to cross these frontiers, those who wanted could and did scale the mountains and crossed the seas. People from across the frontiers also came into the subcontinent and settled here. Facing peace. This is a map of South Asia, including the present countries of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka, and the neighboring countries of the Afghanistan, Iran, China, and Myanmar. South Asia is often called a subcontinent because although it is smaller than a continent, it is very large and is separated from the rest of the Asia by sea, hills, and mountains. So this part once again we have to discuss like which countries are present in the South Asia. So South Asia, in that India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and neighboring countries of Afghanistan, Iran, China, and Myanmar. So overall, if we'll count, one is India, second is Pakistan, third is Bangladesh, fourth is Nepal, fifth is Bhutan, sixth is Sri Lanka, and the Afghanistan, Iran, China, and Myanmar. All these will include in South Asia. No, no, no. Sorry. Here, one thing I'm once again saying the South Asia includes the only India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka. This much. And its neighboring countries are these one. Okay, these are the neighboring countries like only India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. These six countries will make South Asia. Okay, and South Asia is often called a subcontinent because although it is smaller than a continent, it is very large and separated from rest of the Asia by sea, hills and mountains. Now, so these movements of people enriched our cultural tradition. People have shared new ways of like oh so once again I'm coming to this part. These moments of people enriched our cultural traditions. People have shared new ways of carving stone, composing music, and even cooked food over several hundred of years. Names of the lands. Two of the words we often use for our country are India and Bharat. The word India comes from Indus, called Sindhu in Sanskrit. Find Iran and Greece in your atlas. The Iranian and the Greek who came through the northwest about 2005 years. Iranian and the Greek who came through the northwest about 2005 years 500 years ago and were familiar with the Indus called it the Hindos or Indos, and the land to the east of the river was called India. So this thing we must know. The name Bharat was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest and who are mentioned in the Rigveda. The earliest composition in Sanskrit dated to about 3500 years ago. Later it was used for the country. Finding out about the past. There are several ways of finding out about the past. One is to search for and read books that were written long ago. These are called manuscripts because they were written by hand. This comes from the Latin word manu, meaning hands. These were usually written on palm leaf or on the specially prepared bark of a tree known as birch, which grows in the Himalayas. Over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away by insects. Some were destroyed, but many have survived. Many have survived, often preserved in temples and monasteries. These books dealt with all kinds of subjects: religious belief and practices, the lives of kings, medicine, science. Okay, there were epics, poems, plays. Many of these were written in Sanskrit. Others were in Prakrit, languages used by ordinary people, and Tamil. We can also study inscriptions. These are writings on relatively hard surfaces such as stone or metal. These are known as inscriptions. Sometimes the kings got their orders inscribed so that people could see, read, and obey them. There are other kinds of inscriptions as well, where men and women, including kings and queens, recorded what they did. For example, kings often kept records of victories in battle. Can you think of advantage of writing on a hard surface and what could have been difficulties? There were many other things that were made and used in the past. These who study these objects are called archaeologists. They study the remains of buildings made of stone and brick, painting and sculpture. They also explore the excavate or dig under the surface of the earth to find tool, weapons, pots, pans, ornaments, and coins. Some of these objects may be made of stone, others of bone, baked clay, or metal. Objects that are made up of hard, imperishable substances usually survive for a long time. Okay. Archaeologists also look for bones of animals, birds, and fish to find out what people ate in the past. Plant remains survive for more rarely if seeds of grain or piece of wood have been burnt. They survive in a charred form. Do you think? Cloth is found frequently by archaeologists. Historians, that is, scholars who study the past, often use the word source to refer to the information found from the manuscript, inscription, or archaeology. Once sources are found, learning about the past becomes an adventure as we reconstruct it bit by bit. So, historians and archaeologists are like detectives who use all these sources like clues to find out about our past. One past or many. Did you notice the title of this book, One Our Past? Pasts. We have used the word pasts in plural to draw attention to the fact that past was different for different groups of people. For example, the lives of herders or farmers were different from those of the kings and queens. The lives of merchants were different from those of the craftspersons, and so on. Also, as is true even today, people follow different practices and customs in different parts so of the country. For example, today most people living in the Andaman Island get their own food by fishing, hunting, and collecting forest produce. By contrast, most people living in cities depend on the other for supplies of food. Differences such as these existed in the past as well. Besides, there is another kind of difference. We know a great deal about the king and the battle they fought because they kept a record of their victories. Generally, ordinary people such as hunters, fishing, fog gatherers, farmers, or herders did not keep records of what they did. While archaeology helps us to find out about their lives, there is much that remains unknown. What do dates mean? In some, if somebody asks you the date, you will probably mention the date, month, and year 2000. Okay, and something. These years are counted from the dates generally assigned to the birth of Jesus Christ, the founder of Christianity. So 2000 means 2000 years after the birth of the Christ. All dates before the birth of the Christ are counted backwards and usually have the letters BC, before Christ, added on. In this book, we will refer to the dates going back from the present, using 2000 as our starting point. So now, letters with date BC. We have seen stand for BC for before Christ. You will sometimes find AD before dates. This stands for two Latin words, Anno Domini, meaning in the year of the Lord. Okay, that is Christ. So 2005 can also be written as AD 2005. Sometimes CE is used instead of AD and BC is instead of BC. The letter C stands for Common Era and BCE for Before Common Era. We use these terms before because Christian era is now used in most of the countries of the world. In India, we began using this form of dating from about 200 years ago, and sometimes the letter BP before present are used. Find two dates mentioned on the page 3, which set of letters would you use for them elsewhere? We have seen that inscriptions are written on the hard surfaces. Many of these were written in several hundred of years ago. All inscriptions contain both scripts and languages which were used, as well as scripts have changed over time. So, how do scholars understand what was written? This can be done through a process known as decipherment.